started. I'm Jackie Byrne, and thank you very much for coming today. This is one of the topics that I think is the most influential for gifted and 2E kids as they journey through life. So I'm happy to be um, going through this. It is really painful for a lot of kids. So when you know your child's smart, but something's not working, sometimes you see, that they're struggling in school, their grades don't reflect their abilities. And then you get those phone calls from school, the ones where like your heart drops because you wonder what's happened this time. And, you know, outbursts, meltdowns, all kinds of things happen at school. And sometimes they refuse to do schoolwork and then sometimes refuse to go to school itself. So adults ascribe meaning to these behaviors, right? And they usually aren't very positive. Um, Reactionary or, oh, you're being too sensitive, you're lazy, disrespectful, why are you bragging? And it's really understandable that the adults are preoccupied with behavior because that's what we see. But what if these issues aren't really the point? What if these are just the outward signs of unmet needs? So for a really bright or gifted child, new skills always come easily in the beginning, and they understand things the first time. And they identify as the smart kid. There's this deep internalization of intelligence as this is who I am. Sometimes, though, really bright kids have other hidden challenges that aren't obvious immediately. And, developmental, social, emotional, learning challenges. And if you look at this list on the screen, you can say, well, these are all really different. And they are, but the feelings behind having something that's getting in the way are very similar, even if the expression of those differences is different. So these are called twice exceptional or 2E kids. When there are gifts and challenges, the overlap is puts a child sort of in the 2E category. 2E is so easy to miss unless you know what to look for. So test scores are commonly used to determine all kinds of things for students, their needs and their placements. So I want to run through what that looks like. So IQ scores are on a percentage basis, and this score is considered above average. So kids will be placed in regular or even, advanced or honors classes. A below average child will be placed in special ed. And a gifted child will be placed in a gifted program or a pullout once a week, or if you're in a state that requires that and you're lucky. And these are the highest, lowest, and composite scores, though, for the same child. And think about what that means. The gifts mask the challenges mask the gifts, and averages mask outliers. So it's only when you can see the entire test with the subscores that you can really understand what's going on with a child. 2E is more common than you think. So I run a school for 2E students, and these are scores for students where we have full neuropsych testing. There are a number of tests that students can use to be admitted to the school. These are the students for whom we have the full test. So if you look at this, it's the same as what I just showed you. So the blue dot is the lowest subscore. The red dot is the full scale IQ, and the yellow star is their highest subscore. Sometimes we'll take a child when the testing doesn't show the same pattern because we think the testing's wrong and we've gone back to earlier testing, for example. If your child has an IEP meeting coming up, asking them to put the subscores and not just the full scale IQ at the top of the IEP can sometimes really give teachers a chance to understand that something else might be going on with your child, and they have a chance to interpret their behavior a different way. And that's not what usually happens. And teachers don't have any training in 2E. And so it's even more difficult for them when all they have is an above average full scale IQ and they think, what's the matter with this kid? Why isn't this, um, why isn't this child sailing through? So when you have asynchronous scores, they show up in a lot of different ways in the classroom. And so if you have an incorrect placement and or an incorrect support level, we see all kinds of things. So if the level of content is too low, but the steps to complete that assignment are too hard to understand in one, you know, explanation by the teacher, that causes problems. Workload volume exceeds executive functioning skills. There's a high comprehension, and they might be able to talk about anything, but they have low work output. And if they're in an inappropriate peer group. So the kids sometimes face a learning curve for the same time when their learning challenge or something else sort of exceeds the power of their intellect at some point. So they might fall behind classmates for the first time, and they wonder why it looks so easy for everyone else, and they feel isolated from a lack of a peer group. So when it's both too easy and too hard, and adult expectations don't match abilities, the student now feels misunderstood, falsely accused, isolated, and gaslighted. They're swirling in doubt on the inside. Where do I fit in if I'm not the smartest? Was everything I thought I knew about myself a lie? And weren't my gifts what gave me value? Now they're calling their entire self-worth into question. And they're not uncomfortable or frustrated. This is way past that. They are destabilized. Everything they thought they knew about themselves is in question. So they tend to react in one of two ways. They either defend their former identity or they forsake it. So let's look at how this shows up. So I need to preserve my record. I have to make sure that everyone remembers that I'm smart. They refuse to risk a challenge, making excuses, disruptions, and some resort to cheating. If they forsake their former identity, well, I must not be smart after all. So why do I even have to bother? Disengagement is big, shutting down, avoidance, and sort of an I don't care attitude. If that's what you're seeing, it's not a behavior problem. It's an identity crisis. So more things you might see. Perfectionism, if they're trying to defend their, what they see as their former identity as being really smart. Rigidity, hyper awareness of other people's attitudes, of everything going on in the classroom, feeling that they can't be successful. And some kids start masking and hiding their feelings because they see no way out and they don't understand what's going on inside of themselves very well. School refusal, lack of authenticity that goes along with the masking frequently, bragging, and sometimes kids haven't bragged before, and this starts to happen, and you start to see sort of this posturing um, in the classroom and around friends. Anxiety, which is big anyway, this creates even more, and they may be overloaded from a sensory perspective by the noise and the smells and the other kids bumping into them in the hallways. I want to play something from a student to let you hear from his perspective what happened when he had this identity crisis. Um, there is a brief mention of suicidal ideation in this video.
Hi, my name's Teddy. I'm 16 years old, a current high school sophomore, and I'm definitely 2E. Growing up, I had a lot of trouble with school and like with the curriculum and my classmates. And like looking back, I think it was mostly due to how we sort of classify intelligence. Because what we do is like we break it into these three groups. So like you're either average, you're below average, or you're above. And the expectation is that like you fit. It's just one of these groups. Well, I very quickly found out that I didn't. Like I was a big history and English student, but the trouble was I wasn't just good at them. I was extraordinary at them. Like I was multiple grade levels ahead of my classmates. People were telling me that I was a genius. However, at the exact same time, I was floundering in math and science. Like everything had to be repeated at least 3 times for me to remember, and even then, it didn't make sense. So what I was this really angry and confused 13-year-old who had this college level ability in verbal comprehension, writing, and also visual spatial skills, but I could barely do the simplest kinds of math. Like I couldn't count to 30, and it was impossible for me to talk to other kids. And like at the time, of course, my thought process wasn't at all like, yeah, I have a lot of things working out for me. Like I can do cool things, but I need support in other areas. I mean, what I was thinking was, what the hell is wrong with me? Like my IQ is 145. That says I should be the best in everything because isn't that how intelligence works? Isn't it that like you're average or you're not? So what I did was I ended up holding myself to this absurdly high standard in everything. And whenever I couldn't live up to it, I got depressed. I felt like I failed. And I I lost confidence in everything, even the things I was already really, really good at. And it just got worse. I got anxious. Like, I was even suicidal because I had this constant feeling that I had failed, that I couldn't live up to the expectation, my supposed intelligence bracket. And like this notion of being a specialist high performer who also struggles with basic tasks, like that was alien. It just didn't occur to me that strengths and weaknesses could coexist, but they do. And that's what being a 2E individual is. And that's how Flex helped me so much. Like what they did was they treated me as the sum of all of my various abilities, my flaws and quirks, and just the things that make me me. And because of that, because of this composite like perception of me, I was able to do a lot of work on myself. And finally, like I was able to accept who I was for like who I am now. And like I'm I'm the really zany and loud guy who does great in all of his classes, except for math, and I'm completely tone deaf. But get this, I can identify any Red Hot Chili Pepper song within like 5 seconds of it playing and then tell you everything about it. I can't throw a ball for the life of me. I introduced a Saturday night movie with my school spirit team, and I do comic relief roles in theater, and sometimes I help out in the set shop. And like in my spare time, I fool around with old speaker systems, and I'm also writing a stream of consciousness science fiction novel. I mean, all of that's who I am. Like that is a 2E resume. That's me, and I'm really happy about that. Like it's who I am.
Amazing.
Hi, my name's Teddy.
That was
I'm
not what I
16 years
meant to do. Hang on. All right. Um, that video makes me cry every single time. So let's talk about how to help the kids who are in the middle of this, because that's the point once we understand. The first thing is to actually listen the way you just did to Teddy and believe them and affirm their experience. You can't solve the problem because it's too big, so don't immediately try until, it's going to evolve over time. Admit you can't understand everything or that you didn't understand everything before and now you're starting to, and ask how you can help them. Frequently, they're not going to know how you can help them, but the fact that you asked lets them start to think about it and also sort of starts to repair some of the damage that might have been done to your relationship if you think one thing and your child is actually experiencing something else, which is common to all of us parents. Um, look at the world through their eyes. And if you use what we've just covered here, you can start to look maybe at their behaviors in a slightly different way. Advocate for them, particularly if they're younger, and then help them advocate as they get older and as they gain, as they gain that skill. And some kids learn to advocate for themselves fairly early, and other kids, it takes years. Um, I am positive, because this was also true of me, that some of the things that get in the way of the functioning of your household can be really disruptive. So there are things that we think as parents, like, oh, you should take a shower in the morning, or, you know, you have to sit down at breakfast with everybody. If there's something that you can do, if that's, if your child can't manage to get dressed on time and can't manage to get, breakfast eaten and all of that, and you've got other kids to get to class, let some of that go. Who cares if they take a shower and sleep in their clothes? Honestly, right? In the long run, who cares? If it's a little wrinkled, you know, more, I don't know what they call it now, permanent press from my era. Um, can they eat in the car? Can they take extra snacks to school? So let's say your child has a really difficult time reading, seeing the point, even if they can understand it, it's not engaging to them. Try getting a court case. And, if they love logic, get a court case, have them argue one of the points, have them critique, um, a novel and do the characters make sense, and is their behavior logical or illogical? You can bring in their strength into a conversation when they're really struggling with something. If you make it real and relevant, it's like a magic pill, because the kids will, when they see that something is of value to them and to the real world instead of some random thing that they're supposed to learn and they don't understand why, they will do so much better. So let's say they're on the robotics team and they have a time management issue. Figure out when the tournament is and backtrack on a calendar. Show them, okay, these are the blocks of time you have open. Plug something in for each of those blocks of time. They don't know how to do this themselves. Some of them. Some of them are great at time management, but many, many are not. So show them how to do the work, because telling them to organize their time, they can't do that. It almost has to be starting at the end and going backwards. They don't want to do the instructions. Make your point. Have them put together something from IKEA. They won't look at the instructions. I don't know about you, but I can't put together anything from IKEA without instructions. And it's complicated enough sometimes that they may not be able to either. And then if you find real examples of school subjects as you're just going through life, or if you go to a museum and you talk about something from history and then you tell them the whole story that they might not have gotten in school, it makes it so much more interesting and relate it to um, something that's going on now. What's going on now had its start in 1920 or whatever it is. And it's a way of applying critical thinking to what they're learning. And if you take one news event, ask them whose fault it was. Ask them what they think the repercussions are going to be. And when you ask someone if there's I once asked students, there was a fire in a factory in Bangladesh, I think. And I said, whose fault is it? And first they said the landlord and stuff, but then we just kept expanding it. And the Gap was one of the people who used that factory. And I said, well, do you buy the Gap clothing? And you can just keep expanding it and expanding it so that they can understand how everything is connected. Um, and then design extensions for school experiments. If your child is bored or doesn't understand the relevance of a science experiment, make it tougher, include something else, let them do it again at home in a different way. So if you want some quick tools, and we'll send you links to all of this, we have a 2E 101 on our website. There's a student one pager that you can fill out to give to the teacher, the teachers who work with your child. It includes strengths and it includes photos of your child being engaged in something rather than just with something completed, because you want the teacher to know that your child can be really engaged, right? Um, and there are online tools like Is My Kid 2E, a quiz, things like that, and then just workshops. I'm going to do this talk again, but for professionals in, I guess, a couple of weeks. I wanted this to be just parents because I didn't want anyone to worry that, someone from their child study team was here and would hear their questions. So we're keeping this among parents for now. We're going to turn off the recording so you can all feel free to ask questions and they won't be associated with you. All right, so let me